going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. This is our weekly show where we review the Magic stories. And this week we are here to continue our run-through of Battle for Zendikar / Oath of the Gatewatch stories. To my recollection, I may have been wrong about this a few weeks ago. I believe this was the final Battle for Zendikar story. I could be wrong. But regardless, it's unclear on the website, and it's been many years, so I don't exactly remember. But regardless, we're going through them, and so we were inspired by our Return to Zendikar in Zendikar Rising. And so this week we are here to review Promises to Keep by Doug Beyer. My quick review at the top is, this is one of those stories that if you needed to, you could probably skip. But that if you wanted to take it upon yourself to read all the good stories, you should read this one. I thought this one was fine. It's just, I don't know that until way later on, I don't know that this story is really, has any vital information that you need to understand the rest of the story. It's just, could be summarized in, hey, Chandra showed up, by the way. Oh, okay, cool. And but this allows you to find out why, etc. So I'm sorry, I spoke a lot there. What's your quick review at the top, Amy?
This story is good.
Yeah.
It is not one that requires a ton of analysis for a show like this. It's pretty straightforward. The things that it talks about, it actually says them. There's no, like I said, there's no need to analyze it and go deeper. It's all surface level, it all just puts it all out there, which is very appropriate, seeing as how it's a Chandra story. But
I do still, I'm an Azorius, so I still delved a little bit, and we'll get into that, because there's still a video following this, so. But that's our quick review at the top. The reason that we say that is because we want people to be informed, and so if you're interested in reading the story for yourself, the review going forward is going to be a review, not a summary. Right. So we encourage you to read the story for yourself if that's something you're interested in doing, and if you want to, we've tried to remove as many barriers as possible, and so the story can be found in the top link in the description down below, so go ahead and click that link, follow it, and if you're interested, and you can read the story for yourselves. Also, before we get started, I wanted to remind everybody, if you missed last week's episode, you can probably click right up there and check it out, where we, again, found that there wasn't a ton to talk about because it was like a shorter story. And so instead we decided to, while still reviewing it, we decided to do something a little bit different, a little bit voice acty. So if it's something that you missed, I encourage you to click that iCard or tap that iCard and go check that out. And as always, let us know your thoughts, and we appreciate any of you who have already checked that out. But, and also, hey, welcome to the channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. It helps us out immensely. We really do appreciate it. We're live Mondays and Fridays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. Mondays being MTG Arena for all you Magic fans out there. And Fridays being video games. Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 2 continues this Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern. Anyway, that's enough of the plugs. Apologies. But on to the full review itself. I appreciated how this story was able to ground us into where we are in the timeline of events. Because it literally just gave us a scene from a prior story. Yeah. Flat out. Chandra is walking through the trees. We don't know that part. But Chandra is walking through the trees. A manta rider flies overhead and warns Gideon that there is some movement in the trees, which is likely Chandra, who has slipped a little. And Gideon says, go back, check it again, I want a full report. Well, we saw that in an earlier story. And I don't know about you, I think we were saying this before, I didn't think much of it. It was just like, okay, there was some movement, if it was a single Eldrazi, the Manta Rider probably went down, stabbed the crap out of it, and moved on, and didn't need to come back and be like, there's an attacking force up there, or whatever, But now we find out it wasn't an Eldrazi, it was Chandra, although technically there were also Eldrazi, but she took care of them. But I thought that was good, because 2 weeks ago, you had that story. Last week, you had the Obnixilis story, which
was sick.
which was sick. But it also moved beyond that story and further ahead. And now you have the Chandra story, which starts from 2 weeks ago, right? Mm-hmm. And so you need that context because, sure, you could have probably inferred it from the fact that, like, oh, Ulamog's here now, right? But if not, there was definitely that opportunity for us, for example, right? Some snooty story reviewers to sit around and say, hey, why is Ulamog all the way over there when 2 weeks ago Ulamog was here and in the Hedrons and etc.? This grounds you. You know exactly what's going on. They're still building the network and Ulamog is walking towards them. And that kind of blends, no pun intended, with the Ulamog after image. It blends into the next set of scenes with Chandra back on Regatha, etc. So I appreciated that it was a good method of storytelling where they were able to give you a prior scene that happened long enough ago where you would still remember it, but and so for that reason it allows you to be like, we're in the past, I get it. So like it
gives you a concept of how far in the past as well.
Yes.
You know, it puts you in that spot. It doesn't just say, well, a time ago, you know.
And I will say, I felt with this story, and you can correct me if you disagree, and you all can, as always, tell me if you disagree as well. This is now the third time that we are seeing this set of events play out. Mm-hmm. Right? We saw it from Gideon, Jason, Nissa's perspective. We saw it from Obnixilis' perspective. Now we're seeing it from Chandra's perspective.
Yeah, just like a classic TV trope or whatever, where you get to see the same event occur a whole bunch of different times from a whole bunch of different characters' perspectives.
Right. I will say, though, 3 is probably about my max. Because 3 is fine. I get it. Yeah. It makes sense. Now it's like, all right, next week you probably got to shit or get off the pot. Like, I understand, because trust me, it's a big event, right? And it finally ends, we'll talk about the ending, but it finally ends with something that they teased and then teased further, and now they're actually giving it to you, at least to a degree.
Right.
And so, at least they're giving you a little bit more each time, right? They extended it with the Obnixilis thing for the Hedrons falling and etc. And to him calling for something. Now they extend it again, this time to what actually comes up and what that looks like. And then next week maybe they'll give us further of what that looks like following that. So like, I get it. But yeah, I heard you saying yes, you would somewhat agree. But it's just like, okay, sure, 3, I get it. Rule of 3, right, is absolutely a storytelling motif as well. That once you've done 3, I'm done. That's good enough.
Okay.
Now give us what we're waiting on.
All right.
That's me personally. Again, if people disagree, I'd love to hear from you. But
I'd love to keep putting it off because I don't want Kozilek to come.
but I also think that
because I love Zendikar.
Well, fair enough. But I also think that it's important because it's such a big moment.
Yeah.
Literally, figuratively, whatever you want to say, like a second Titan, the first Titan showing up in the first place, then a demon planeswalker regaining his spark, and then a second Titan showing up, all in the same place of all these people who are fighting for their lives, fighting for their world, their, whatever.
Yeah. There's a couple of, there's a number of planeswalkers thrown into the mix there, and some other fairly powerful people who aren't planeswalkers.
Right.
But for the most part, it's just citizens of the world.
Right. Innocent people.
Yeah.
Just fighting to stay alive.
Just trying to make it through the day.
Yeah. Then we get from Zendikar, Chandra leaves, shows back up on Regatha, and has her speech. Her abbot speech, as she gives. When she finally gets to it, the moment of her struggling through was hilarious. Super funny. And that's I appreciate that aspect of Chandra's character from early on. We haven't really seen it recently because there have been a lot of different changes, and we haven't really seen a lot of Chandra characterization since pre War of the Spark, right? Because even in War of the Spark, it was kind of barely there, and when it was done, people know what happened, and it wasn't great.
Please
so
stop talking.
Sorry, but early Chandra character building was her being so unsure and so childlike in her thinking, in her methodology, in her acting, and etc.
I wouldn't say it was childlike. I would say it was scattered.
Sure.
You know,
scattered, undisciplined, I guess, is more the word I'm looking for than childlike, but lacked maturity, right? And impulsive, right? And I wrote that down here for a discussion for later. But when she actually spoke from the heart, instead of trying to be like, I have to say a thing here, and I will say it, right? And it's just like, you don't...
Here's this formality I need to be a part of.
Yeah, you don't believe a damn thing you're saying.
Right.
So get to the actual point and say that instead.
Right.
And when she finally does, it's great. That speech was great.
Yeah.
I know you enjoyed it as well. And let me ask, and I'll ask you, and I'll ask folks watching as well. Would you, at the end of that speech, have been one of the monks cheering or jeering?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I knew you would. I probably would as well. I guess it depends on my situation. I might have, feigned jeering and, not shown her that I was clapping for her, but also not clapped to, ruffle any feathers.
Nah, fuck it. Cheer the shit out of that.
Mm-hmm. Amy and I are different people sometimes. and again, neither I would like to say that neither of us are wrong. But you may actually think that what I would do, and this is what I feel like I would do, who knows. You may think that that's cowardly, right? Because it's like, it's the right thing, but you're not willing to cheer it because you're afraid of what other people will think, yet you think it. So
there's nothing wrong with being the type of person who cares about the way that their decisions affect other people and the way that other people respond to the decisions that they make.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with being that kind of person. And it's just that for me there's a stopping point.
Okay.
where doing the right thing is more important than that.
Sure, and being true to yourself is a thing, because you're not lying to the people around you, you're lying to yourself, more like, right? Because not saying something isn't exactly lying to them, but yeah. No, I can absolutely see that. I absolutely see that.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being that kind of a person, and I think everyone has a level of that to their personality, unless they're just straight up a fucking asshole. But, I think there's a sort of a spectrum of where people land in terms of what they're willing to accept as other people's reactions to their decisions.
Sure. Sure.
Some people can't deal with being shunned or being fired or being told that they're wrong.
Yep.
And that's probably not great. So maybe if that's where you're at on that spectrum, maybe try to nudge your way a little bit further along. Some people are strongly at the other end.
Sure.
And,
yeah.
The older I get, the less strongly at the other end I am, and the more, close to, keeping the peace I am. Because I understand the importance of that a lot more now.
Sure.
Than I used to when I was younger.
Sure. Okay. I wanted to talk a bit about Mother Luti. Mother Luti's in this story, and for people who don't remember, we get, I guess, what would be a bit of a bombshell about Mother Luti in Dominaria stories. I believe it's Dominaria where we find that out.
Okay.
And reading this story, knowing what we know of Mother Luti from what, when we were reading these stories, would be future stories, but is now past stories in 2021, what we know about Mother Luti now, it's not as... It doesn't hit the same way. Because Mother Luti having that moment where she steps up to Chandra and asks Chandra what's going on, and Chandra says, well, I feel like I have to go and I have to help people. And Mother Luti's like, but you're not sure. And Chandra's like, well, no, but, I can't just stay here. Like, people need me. And Mother Luti's like, well, too bad. I forbid you to go.
You're gonna do that now.
And Chandra's like, you can't forbid me.
Like, what?
I need to do this, and actually like yells and is definitive in her statement and sure of herself in her statement of, I need to go, they need me. And Mother Luti says, good, well now at least you're sure.
Right.
And so gave her the old reverse psychology of like, well, you want to go? You can't. Well, I'm gonna, and so...
Yeah, I mean, that's not really what that is, right? Because then it's the kind of thing where, like, Mother Luti is the one making the decision for her. And kind of saying, well, okay, like, I'm just gonna tell you the opposite of the thing,
Well, so this is what I kind of wanted to talk about, because that's why I was saying, I believe it was from Dominaria, and if I'm wrong, correct me, but I believe the realization, by the way, spoilers, I guess, but the realization that we came to, or that we realized, is Mother Luti is JaAR, Ballard, and vice versa, obviously. And what that means is JaAR was always looking out for Chandra. JaAR was always in charge of the school, or the monks, that worshipped her ideologies in the first place, disguised as Mother Luti. But because we know that, and we also know that when JaAR is working with Chandra and trying to help her, she's trying to help Chandra to control her impulses and to focus her power and her magic into a more constructive use of her abilities.
Right.
But to me, when I read this, it sounded like it could have been Mother Luti kind of using Chandra's impulsiveness for the good of everyone.
I didn't see it that way.
Okay, sure. That's why I wanted to bring it up.
I saw it as the opposite. Like, she is doing that with this.
Okay.
What she's doing is she's creating conviction within Chandra by forcing her to look more closely at something and decide.
Okay.
As opposed to being scattered like she always is. When you're scattered like that and you're trying to make a decision, you have every possible scenario in your mind. And this was her way of focusing that.
Well, I was going to say...
saying, no, decide.
Right.
Have conviction in what you believe in, because that's the only way to be disciplined enough to do good with your powers.
Sure. Yeah, it reminds me of, God knows I've been in this situation a million times. I doubt it's just me, but who knows. But the fact that there are situations where you have two choices or more than one choice, and you're sitting there and you're going, okay, well, I think it should be this, but God, depending on the day, depending on the second, this other one also has just as much merit. So which do I go with? And so, okay, so Mother Luti kind of giving her that push of like, it's that old trick of like, if you have two choices to make, flip a coin, but don't look at have somebody else with you, right? And they're like, okay, pick A or B, or pick what's heads, what's tails. Okay, good. I'm going to flip it and we'll see what it is. and they put their hand there, but they don't lift their hand off to show you what the coin lands on, and they say, so which one do you want? Because as you flip that coin in the air, instinctively, many times, the person who had to choose between the two things knows what they wanted that coin to land on.
Okay. As opposed to knowing prior to the coin flip.
Well, but again, you knew it, you just didn't know that you knew it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So that coin flip is awakening in you that, like, this is the do or die moment. So what do you want it to be? And you don't ask them that, but they feel that as the coin is up in the air, because that coin's coming down and that decision's going to be made,
right,
and it's being taken out of your hands. And so you catch that coin, and then you say, okay, which did you want? Doesn't matter what this coin says. What did you want? Was there one that jumped out in your mind? You went, oh God, I want it to be this, right? There's that moment of, like, your body knows, your mind knows subconsciously, but you didn't know it. And so in this case, Chandra's like, I think that's what I want, but I'm not really sure. I feel like I have the responsibility to stay here. So Mother Luti flat out says to her, you cannot go. And Chandra's like, so again, Mother Luti made the decision, right? And said you have to stay. But she didn't.
I think it's kind of like Chandra here is thinking about the importance of the situation on Zendikar,
Mm-hmm.
and weighing it against the importance of her duty.
Sure.
And she understands that the weight of what's going on Zendikar is so... It's so immediate.
Yeah.
And it's so terrible.
It's truly life or death.
Yeah.
For many people. Whereas training monks is important,
right,
but they're not going to die if she leaves.
Right. So I think she just needed to prioritize, because if you think about prioritization, you're not necessarily saying this thing is more important than this thing. Because you're also taking into account the immediacy, right? Mm-hmm. You're taking into account, is this an emergency or can this wait?
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that's an emergency is the thing you do first, even if it's the same level of importance. But I think what she had to realize here was that it wasn't even the same level of importance. She told herself that it was because she didn't want to let people down. She took on this huge responsibility that she went into it feeling like she wasn't good enough to take on that responsibility.
Right.
So she got there and she didn't want to, at the first sign of something else happening, she didn't want to be distracted by it.
Right.
She wanted to fulfill her duty. And that's perfectly admirable. It's just that immediacy calls.
Yeah.
You know, that life or death situation has to be prioritized. It has to, it has to take that front row seat, because she would regret it for her entire life if she found out that everyone on Zendikar died and she wasn't there.
Specifically Gideon and Jace, it seems, just based on her, like, what she's most concerned about when she gets there. But again, that doesn't mean she's heartless and selfish. It's just that you still would gravitate towards people that you know, right? I don't want my friends to die, as well as all of these innocent people, but obviously she has a stronger connection to those two.
Well, and she probably then would think that she would have more of a possibility of saving the people close to her than saving a whole ton of people who she doesn't know.
Right. Well, and that's why she
it's
spends...
more likely that you'll be able to save those few people whom you care about than, just a large group of people.
Well, and that's why she spends most of the time when she first gets there, and both times that she first gets there, just looking for Jace and Gideon and trying to see if she can find them. And her second time through, she doesn't, at least not by the end of the story. But you were enjoying in the story that kind of badass moment where Chandra shows back up after speaking with Mother Luti, and there's some Eldrazi there, and whereas the first time she was there, she's like, okay, I've seen it, I've taken my peek, I kind of just want to leave, and then the Eldrazi kind of force themselves upon her,
Right.
And she has to defend herself. This time the Eldrazi show up, and she's just like, nah, and just gets rid of
Fuck
them.
this shit.
Yeah, she just deals with them immediately
Yeah.
instead of like tiptoeing around them. She just...
Well, because Mother Luti said it was okay.
Mhm.
Mother Luti said, no, this is important. It needs to happen now. Go do this.
Well, and
And that gave her the confidence to react that way.
well, not only that, but the second time she was there to stay, as opposed to, oh, I'm just here looking around, right? I'm not actually staying. I'm just here to take a peek, and I gotta go, so I can't get like involved in stuff. I just have to leave. But this time she's like, okay, I'm here to stay. Like, if I walk away, these things are just gonna follow me. Might as well just burn them to death. And so she does so, and you really appreciated. There was like the phrase where she burns them up and then just shoulder tackles their charred forms as she walks
Yeah.
past them.
Like, goes through their, like, apparating bodies. Amazing.
Awesome. Then we get another
Like,
moment.
dusting, and she's just like...
Just slightly
No.
pushes it out of the way.
like when people walk through explosions in movies.
They don't
Like-
walk through explosions. Sometimes they walk through fire.
Well,
They
like
walk
the
away from explosions.
No, they're on the back side of the explosion,
Yes.
and then after the explosion happens, there's this cloud of smoke, and
Yes.
then all of a sudden they come walking out
Sure,
of it.
sure.
Obviously they didn't get exploded; they were just
And then they
behind
just
it.
walk out casually like it's no big deal.
Right, exactly.
Probably happened in like a Terminator movie or something.
Well, but in real life, you'd have like smoke inhalation, and you'd be coughing and crouching a little bit. And
Minor injuries. Anyway, then you have another comparison moment to a prior story, this time last week's. So again, Ob Nixilis' story ends, or towards the end of Ob's story, we hear Ob talking about the stuff that's around him, right? And what he notices and what he doesn't, what's impactful to him and what's not. And he talks about there's like a gaggle of planeswalkers down there trying to make a difference. And so when Chandra shows up and sees what Ob is doing, I'm like, oh cool, so she's gonna be in that group. She's not. Not yet. It turns out she sees Ob doing what he's doing, and she tries to attack him. We didn't hear about that last week, so I was like, oh, that's a little bit of like a continuity error. He would probably at least notice it. But no, the ley lines from the Hedrons kind of twisted up her fire magic and dissipated it before it even got to him.
Yeah.
And at the time that they were discussing her having done that is when Ob is like absorbing all that power. He's getting his spark back. He's calling for Kozilek. So he's a little busy. So it makes sense that the demon planeswalker who just got his spark back, who barely notices Gideon, Jace, Nissa, whoever is down there, trying to get all the innocent people away from the Eldrazi, killing them, he's probably not at all going to notice a spell that he himself didn't even deflect, and it didn't get close enough to him for him to even notice.
Right.
So, still works within the continuity set in last week's story, which is good because these people knew what they were doing and were working with each other, and by that I mean the authors of
Right.
these stories knew what they were doing and they were working with each other, so that week to week you'd hope that the continuity would at least be simpatico with one another, if you will. And it was. I won't say I was impressed by it, but I noticed it and I appreciated it.
Right.
And then, finally-ish, as we hinted at, you okay? We need water when we're done with this.
I breathed in dust or something?
Oh, there you go. I can't help you. I will do enough talking for both of us, don't you worry. She was never worried. We finally get...
It's the smoke inhalation from the explosion.
There you go. We finally get Kozilek. Finally. We knew it was coming. People who have read this story previously knew it was coming. And I don't recall if by the time this came out, if we knew what Oath of the Gatewatch cards were going to be there. And so if we knew that Kozilek was coming or not, I don't recall. Again, it's been a little bit.
Right.
Only like 5 years or so.
A number of years.
Yeah. And so, but we finally get to see Kozilek. We don't hear his name, but we see a picture of him. We know that it's another Titan. So, it's definitely not Emrakul, so who else is it, you know?
It should be Emrakul.
It is. I know you do. It is a few months after this, don't worry. We've reviewed those stories already, so we're not going to go back and do that. But
I want to.
Maybe someday.
Okay.
If you want it, ask. But anyway, I think it will be interesting because I don't actually remember how much they focus on this. I am very interested, after all of these Battle for Zendikar stories and how they've gone, I'm super interested to see how Kiora is going to react to the fact that Cozy is now here.
Yeah.
Her god that she worships but doesn't worship, but she has people who followed her because they are also secret worshippers of Cozy. And now Cozy's actually here,
right,
but is going to try to kill them all.
Right.
So, like, how is that going to work? And Cozy...
It'll be an interesting translation kind of moment.
Right. So I'm curious to see what happens there. And if it gets touched upon at all. Because I don't recall if it does. That wasn't the impactful part of this story to me the first time through, because I was kind of more focused on the big picture stuff. Now I can focus on more of the minutia, and I think that through line, that thread of the merfolk faith in believing that these Eldrazi Titans are gods. I'm really interested to see what happens now that a second one is here, whereas Ula, at least for Kiora, right, Ula was the one who was always the butt of Cozy's jokes. And so we knew that Ula was played the fool constantly.
Right.
So to Kiora, fighting Ulamog is no big deal. This is the chump god that always gets his ass beat or fooled by Cozy.
Right.
Well, now Cozy's here. What the hell are you going to do now?
Right.
So I'm really curious to see where they go with that. But we're going to have to wait to find out. Because we got many more weeks of these stories. So definitely stay tuned. I don't know if you had more to say. I didn't want to...
I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said at the beginning, this story is pretty straightforward. It says what it means and it means what it says. So there's not a lot to really say about it other than what we've said.
Yeah. So if you have other thoughts, opinions, to agree with us, disagree with us, or something that we didn't talk about at all, we would love to hear from you as always in the comments down below, because discussing these stories, whether we think that there's a lot to go in depth on, or even if it's just appreciating a good story for what it is and sitting back and enjoying reading a story for once. All of that is a great way for all of you to join all of us in showing off our...
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
That's right. We will be back next week with a continuation of these. Happy Pride Month, everybody. We will be back next week with the continuation of these stories. We really hope that everybody is enjoying. As I mentioned, we have lots of things going on this channel and our other channels. Check the links down in the description box below. You can subscribe and ring the bell there as well.
Or check them out on the channel tab.
Yeah, there you go.
The channels tab.
That's right. So, thank you all so very much once again. And for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.